Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing Game 29 of the regular season between the San Jose Sharks and the St. Louis Blues, in which the Sharks have lost 5-2, their final game of this 8-game series against the St. Louis Blues. And in every previous game, the difference in terms of victory had been just a single goal. 4 of the games went to overtime, but here tonight, the Blues may be sending a bit of a message with this 5-2 regulation win. And this was a very important game. This was a very important weekend for the San Jose Sharks to try and really keep their playoff hopes alive, keep their playoff hopes afloat. And in the end, with this regulation loss, they now find themselves 11 points out of a playoff spot over halfway through this season. The Sharks with only 27 games remaining on their schedule, making it a very, very steep climb and giving their playoffs chances really slim to none. And this game started off rather well for the San Jose Sharks. In the first couple of minutes of the game, Gambrell scored to make it 1-0, but then the Blues would come back. They'd get an extremely lucky goal from Vince Dunn, and then eventually a goal from Jordan Kyrou to make it 2-1 at the end of the first period. But in the second period, the Sharks would manage to fight back. They would score the only goal of that middle frame, coming from Tomas Hertl, and we would head into the third period tied at 2. So for the third straight game, the Sharks needed to get a good third period to carry them through, and for the third straight game, they were unable to do that. Yes, it wasn't a 2-goal lead like a couple games ago. Yes, it wasn't even a lead in general like last game, but here tonight, they were coming in at a tie score. They needed to win the third, and they just couldn't do it. Now, I will say, a few minutes into this third period, with the game tied at 2, we did have a very interesting penalty call. So Patrick Marleau ends up getting called for a face-off violation. Now, normally the only real face-off violation penalty that you would see is the penalty for when a player plays the puck with their hand off the face-off. So when they first announced that it was a face-off violation penalty, that's what I had assumed it was. But there is also a lesser-known rule in the rulebook that states, of course, when a player does something illegal on the face-off, they get kicked out and a second player steps in. But if that second player also does something that is deemed illegal by the linesman, they can't get kicked out for a third player, and they are instead assessed a penalty. However, this is something that you basically never see at all. Usually they just end up dropping the puck, but it seems as though the linesmen and the referees decided tonight's game, in a very, very important game for the Sharks and the Blues to a bit of a lesser extent, in the third period of a game that was tied 2-2, that this moment was the perfect moment to give a refresher course on the rulebook to the San Jose Sharks and the St. Louis Blues. And so the Sharks get called for this penalty, and they get burned by it rather quickly. Ryan O'Reilly scores to make it 3-2, and the Blues don't look back from there. They eventually add another from Kyrou and an empty netter from Perron to win it 5-2. First thing to talk about would be Devan Dubnik. And remember in my previous review when I was talking about Martin Jones, and I said, well, unless Devan Dubnik plays a really nice game here tonight, then Jones will probably be the in nets for the game on Monday. Well, be prepared to see Jones in net against the Kings on Monday, because this was not a very good game from Devan Dubnik at all. He doesn't have much of a chance at all on the first goal from Dunn. Obviously, these couple of strange bounces off of the stick and then the knee, it seems, of Erik Karlsson before going in. And he doesn't have much of a chance at all on the second Jordan Kyrou goal. However, the first Kyrou one, well, this is definitely a defensive breakdown in front of the net from the San Jose Sharks. I would have liked to see Dubnik down on the ice already, so that they can't just go through the 5-hole easily on Kyrou's attempt one-timer in front in the slot. And on the other goal from Ryan O'Reilly, while this isn't necessarily an easy save to make, this is one, after you just get called for a very weird penalty and your team is tied at 2 and you're hoping for a big save, something like this that's kind of a simple shot, you are hoping that Devan Dubnik is going to be able to make the save there. And also, there was one scored by the St. Louis Blues back in the first period. It could have been 3-1, but luckily the Sharks actually managed to challenge it for the offside, and it was deemed that the player had been offside 30 seconds earlier or something like that. But that was a very, very weak goal as well from Devan Dubnik, and this was all on just about 20 shots on goal for the St. Louis Blues. So not a great game from Devan Dubnik at all, as his, he continues to fall from where he was just a couple of games ago. So as I said, Jones will be the goaltender in net, likely, very, very likely on Monday. Next, I'll talk about Antti Suomela. So Suomela showed up to the Sharks a couple years ago, and he actually was looking pretty good near the start of that season, but I don't know what the story was behind it, but he somehow found his way into the doghouse of Peter DeBoer and never could really escape, and then he's been called up every once in a while here or there to get a few games, but he's never really been able to find a consistent spot in the Sharks lineup since that first season with the San Jose Sharks. He gets called back up here right now for this game due to the injury of Matt Nieto, and he actually doesn't look all that bad. It's not as though he was making crazy things happen offensively, but he wasn't a liability, which was something that was nice to see. He got a couple decent opportunities. There was a 2-on-1 where he makes the pass to Leonard. Leonard had a decent chance to score because of it, and Suomela, interestingly enough, was also getting some penalty kill time, which I thought was, I guess it makes sense because Nieto was a penalty killer, so you would want to bring up a different penalty killer to fill that role, but it was also not something I expected Suomela to be, decent at, which I guess you could say he was. If one of the two players here for the San Jose Sharks do return from injury in the following game, either that be Balcers or Nieto, I definitely would like to see Suomela kept in the lineup, and maybe someone like Handemark step out to fill to allow that injured player to come back into the lineup. Unfortunately, I guess if both were to come back, Suomela would probably have to step back anyway. Next, I'll be talking about some lineup choices from Bob Booner in this game. It's no secret that this season I haven't really seen eye to eye with the Sharks head coach, and tonight is another one of those things. So a couple games ago, it was Balcers with the second line of Meyer and Hertl. It was working pretty well, but then Balcers got injured, came back, got injured again, and Nieto was the one who was filling in for him, and that actually looked pretty good. It was a pretty solid line, but now Nieto was injured for tonight's game, so Booner had to look for another choice, and that choice, at least at the start of this game, was John Leonard. And in the first period, Leonard was given a few minutes on this second line, and I don't think he looked all that bad at all. There was maybe a bit of a lack of chemistry between them, and it's not like they were running all over the St. Louis Blues, but it was pretty decent, I would say. And yet after the first period, going into the second period, Leonard was immediately demoted to the fourth line in favor of Patrick Marleau being put up to the second line. And I know you're really trying to win this game, right? This is supposed to feel like a game that is very important for the playoff chances of the San Jose Sharks, but is Patrick Marleau really significantly better than John Leonard on this second line? I really, really doubt it. And I've already said it once before this season, and I'll say it again. Patrick Marleau is mostly just in the lineup as a sort of respect thing. He's kept in the lineup to try and pass that Gordie Howe all-time games played record, and he certainly isn't kept in the lineup because he's such an effective forward game in, game out. And you can bet if Patrick Marleau wasn't, carrying the legacy of Marleau, and he was just some sort of random rookie or sophomore player, he would have probably been benched a few games thus far this season. And so I really don't think Marleau is giving you such a bigger winning opportunity, winning chance being on the second line than John Leonard is. And the fact is that after these next 27 games pass, of course, if the Sharks don't make the playoffs, which seemingly is more likely, Marleau will probably retire at that point, while John Leonard absolutely could be part of the fabric of the Sharks' future moving forward into the next, decade, you could even say. And so it would be nice to get Leonard, more time on ice with those second liners, with Hertl, with Meyer, instead of having Marleau up there on the second line. It just felt a bit like he wasn't really given a fair shake at it, and it's not as though Marleau in the next two periods where he was kept completely on that second line was anywhere better. But finally, I'll talk about this last point, which is, of course, special teams. The Sharks' power play and their Sharks' penalty kill have been pretty bad in the past few games, I must be said. First of all, on the power play, it is definitely true that the Sharks haven't been given a ton of opportunities. They only had 2 power plays in the previous game. They only had 1 power play here tonight, which is to be expected, of course. The St. Louis Blues are one of the cleanest teams in the NHL by far, sort of the darlings of the NHL in that regard. Lady Bings to all of them. You see, when Perron was actually slashing at the legs of Marcus Sorensen in, I believe, the second period, that's actually just, some love taps. It's a way of saying hello in St. Louis. It's a little known language there, but so the Sharks weren't given too many power plays, but the power plays that they did get, which was the 3 of them, were completely disastrous. They did basically nothing against the St. Louis Blues on the power play. It felt as though whenever the Sharks would get a power play, the Blues would be the ones actually capitalizing on the opportunity. It was kind of crazy. I remember the overtime in the previous game. It was like maybe the last 20 or 30 seconds of the power play. It felt as though the Blues, with just 3 players on the ice compared to 4 of the Sharks, were actually trying to push the puck forward as if they knew that the Sharks were weak on the power play, and they're like, oh yeah, we can definitely get a shorthanded chance here. It was kind of strange to watch, but they were certainly not in the wrong to do that because the Sharks power play was looking so bad. And on the topic of the penalty kill as well, it feels as though the Sharks have had a bit of fragile mental game in these past few games against the Blues and the Golden Knights, and you could see that very heavily as they've been called for penalties and they've been giving up goals like in the first 7 to 10 seconds of those penalties. They get called for this weird face-off violation one, and instead of sort of rallying around such a strange call and being able to kill off the penalty, instead they let in a goal in the first 12 seconds of the power play. We saw it in the couple games ago against the Golden Knights. They get called for too many men on the ice, rough call, whatever. Let's go out and kill the penalty while up 3-1. Nope, give up a goal to Cody Glass in the first few seconds. The game before that, they give up one in the first few seconds to Max Pacioretty. And it's just, the penalty kill has to be more ready. It has to be able to win that face-off, get that puck out early. And just in general, the special teams have been a big part of why the Sharks now have 4 losses in a row. But that will do it for this review. The Sharks will be back in action on Monday. They'll take on the Los Angeles Kings, a bit of an easier team to deal with than they had to in these past couple of games against the Blues and the Golden Knights. And of course, with the Kings still pretty much in the thick of things in terms of a playoff race, maybe the Sharks can rain on their parade a bit, and who knows, if the Sharks can get a couple points on the board, maybe there is still a chance. Class dismissed.